The continuous denial of bail to Umar Khalid and Sharjeel Imam in connection with the 2020 Delhi riots case has drawn widespread public attention to a deeper problem in India's criminal justice system, that is, pre-trial detention. They have spent years in jail now, even though the trial is yet to conclude and the guilt has not yet been proven. Hello everyone, I am Nayan Girigosavi, and in this video we discuss this larger issue in depth. Let us begin with a basic principle of criminal law. Bail is the rule and jail is an exception. Now, this principle flows directly from Article 21 of the Indian Constitution, which guarantees personal liberty and requires that no person shall be deprived of it except through fair and just procedure. It also rests on a foundational idea of criminal justice, that every accused is presumed innocent until proven guilty. Yet, when we look at Indian prisons today, we encounter a disturbing reality. Nearly 70% of prisoners are under trials, people who have not been convicted of any crime. They are legally innocent, yet they are imprisoned. So what is pretrial detention and why is it allowed? Pretrial detention refers to keeping an accused person in custody during investigation or trial before guilt is finally established. In law, it is justified as a preventive measure. Courts argue that detention may be necessary to prevent the accused from escaping, from influencing witnesses, or from threatening public order. However, during actual bail hearings, courts rarely examine whether the accused will flee or obstruct the trial. Instead, judges frequently consider the seriousness of the alleged offense, the past conduct of the accused, criminal history, moral character, and even the level of public outrage surrounding the case. Now, these factors are not forward-looking. They're backward-looking. They're the very considerations normally applied after conviction at the stage of sentencing. At this point, pre-trial detention begins to resemble punishment rather than prevention. To understand this more clearly, consider a simple analogy. Imagine a government employee who is suspended pending an inquiry. Officially, the suspension is not a punishment. But during this period, the person may lose income, reputation, professional standing, and mental peace. Even before the guilt is established, real harm is suffered. In a similar way, pre-trial detention may be labeled procedural, but its consequences are deeply punitive. The constitutional courts themselves have recognized this danger. In Hussain Ara Khatun versus State of Bihar case of 1979, the Supreme Court exposed how thousands of under trials were kept in prison for years without trial and declared that speedy trial is an essential part of Article 21 of the Indian Constitution. The judgment made it clear that prolonged detention without conviction violates personal liberty. Later, in Sanjay Chandra versus CBI case of 2011, the court reiterated that the purpose of bail is not to punish and that imprisonment before conviction should not become the norm, merely because the allegations are serious. Despite these clear constitutional principles, bail is frequently denied in practice on grounds such as the gravity of the offense or the need to send a strong message to society. This exposes a clear gap between constitutional doctrine and the judicial behavior. Another problem arises with the use of proportionality at the bail stage. Proportionality is a core principle of punishment. It means that the severity of punishment should match the seriousness of the offense. Now, this principle belongs to sentencing, which comes only after conviction. However, courts often apply proportionality at the bail stage itself, arguing that serious offenses justify longer detention. This means that the accused is made to suffer in proportion to the allegations, even though the guilt has not been proven. This, in effect, is punishment without conviction. Now, let's look at how the bail is used as an instrument of moral censure and social messaging. Bail orders increasingly use strong language, criticizing the accused and framing detention as necessary to uphold the societal values. In some cases, bail is denied, not because the accused poses a procedural risk, but because releasing him may appear to legitimize the alleged act. Bail then becomes a tool of symbolic punishment, a way of sending a moral message to society, directly weakening the presumption of innocence. As is evident in certain cases, denial of bail has often relied on the seriousness of the allegations and the perceived impact on public order rather than concrete findings of the guilt. Trials have progressed slowly, yet detention continues. This situation has revived the constitutional debate on whether pre-trial imprisonment is being used as a substitute for conviction, particularly in politically sensitive cases. Now, the punitive nature of pre-trial detention becomes even more evident when we look at the prison conditions. Under trials face overcrowded jails, poor sanitation, health risks, psychological stress, and prolonged uncertainty. They lose jobs, social standing, and family stability. Their families suffer economic hardships and social stigma. In everyday reality, the experience of an under trial is often indistinguishable from that of a convicted prisoner. A profound loss of liberty that damages dignity and livelihood functions as a punishment, regardless of how the law describes it. This system also operates unevenly across society. The rich can secure bail more easily, while the poor remain imprisoned for longer durations. As a result, pre-trial detention becomes punishment based on poverty rather than guilt. A legal process meant to protect liberty ends up reinforcing inequality. Recognizing these failures, multiple reform bodies have raised serious concerns. The Law Commission of India has repeatedly warned against the excessive use of arrest and prolonged under-trial detention, recommending liberal use of bail and greater reliance on summons instead of custody. Parliamentary committees and criminal justice reform reports have highlighted that overcrowding in prisons is driven mainly by under-trials and not convicts. Recent official prison data continues to show that under-trials form the overwhelming majority of the prison inmates. All of this creates a serious constitutional problem. The Constitution promises personal liberty, fair procedure, and the presumption of innocence. Yet pre-trial detention leads to suffering before conviction. When courts rely on suspicion and perception rather than proof, the line between the procedure and the punishment gets blurred. A society's respect for the rule of law is not measured by how harshly it punishes the guilty. It is measured by how carefully it treats those who are still accused. When pre-trial detention starts functioning as punishment, justice no longer waits for the truth. It moves ahead of it. And this poses a serious challenge for the individual liberty. Thank you.